We've all had our share of travel nightmares at one point or another. Anxiously waiting for the attendant over the loudspeaker to determine your fate as you stand by ready to board the plane, or when there's a mechanical issue on the train, causing you to have to find another form of transportation altogether. And all this while dealing with the uncertainty of Mother Nature. It can make everyone stressed out, and at times bring up the worst in us as we scream at the desk attendant who didn't make the call to begin with. For 90 minutes, all this and more happened to Neal Page as he tries to get back to Chicago for Thanksgiving from New York City. And to kick off the busy holiday season, I chose to watch John Hughes' masterful comedy Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, starring the wonderful John Candy and Steve Martin. This odd couple road trip film drops us into the chaotic, funny, and at times tender world of travel, and reminds us at times that you have to laugh at the various situations that cross your path. Joining me today are Real Beans supporters Alan and Casey, returning with their own insights on the film. So, grab your coffee to go, your passport, and some patience. And let's get traveling. Hi everyone, and welcome to Real Beans. Please be sure your seatbelts are fastened before we take off on this hilarious and oftentimes chaotic ride. For today's film, we are talking about the 1987 comedy Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, directed by John Hughes, who is most known for his teenage comedies like The Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. His film looks into the stressful and exciting world of travel and the many issues that occur while we try to get from one destination to another. The film begins in New York City with Neal Page as a marketing executive, played by the great Steve Martin. The CEO can't make a decision on the new presentation, and after a while decides to hold off on the decisions until after the holiday. Stressed and needing to get back to Chicago for Thanksgiving, Neal runs out to grab a cab during rush hour. Good luck. After a funny chase scene with Kevin Bacon, Neal misses his chance for a cab after tripping over a large trunk. After losing the cab to the man who had the trunk, Neal finally makes it to the airport. Prior to boarding, he notices a familiar face sitting across from him. It's Griffith, played by John Candy, who was the cause of Neal missing his taxi. After some awkward chit-chat, Neal leaves to board the plane, but not before having a quarrel with the flight attendant due to some snafu with his first-class ticket. He's been moved to coach, and his seat is right next to, you guessed it, Del. After a nap and the plane landing, Neal finds that they are in Wichita, Kansas, after a blizzard caused trouble at the Chicago airports. Neal, now trying everything in his power to get home, joins Del as they find their way back to Chicago. Through the course of their adventure, their train malfunctions, his rental car is missing, long bus rides, having money stolen while sleeping in a rundown motel, and dealing with a car on fire. The list goes on, and we begin to empathize with Neal, as we've all had our share of travel mishaps. I remember being on a flight to go on vacation with my parents to Knoxville, Tennessee, and being rerouted to Chattanooga during a storm. This forced me to spend the night in a hotel, and then rent a car to drive back to Knoxville. Thankfully, I didn't have the issues that Neal faced in the film, but it did cause some unnecessary stress. I thought for Thanksgiving this would be a fun film to discuss, as I had never seen it before. I was worried that this film would be what I would call an angry comedy, where situations happen to the main character over and over without reprieve, and I feel more angry than amused. Fortunately, John Hughes masterfully directs this, with enough moments to take a breather and provide some genuine tenderness between our main characters. Yes, Neal's situation goes from bad to worse, but it's mostly due to things out of his control, and with Del being able to provide some levity, even if it's awkward or annoying. It gives the audience a break from the mayhem. After watching the film with Casey and Alan, who had both seen it before, we discussed the issues and nuances that stood out to them on this repeated viewing. We talked about Del's reasoning for choosing Neal as his appointed travel mate, and how he seems to go to great lengths to keep Neal around. He stirs things up and often makes matters worse, which made us wonder, was their meeting purely a coincidence or something more intentional? Did Del spot Neal as a wealthy person and conveniently keep crossing his path? Given that Del doesn't seem to have anything urgent to do, he isn't as anxious to reach the next destination. unlike Neal, whose main purpose is getting home by Thanksgiving. Neal, on the other hand, is out of his element through most of the film's scenarios. He's surrounded by working-class folks, people who would quickly recognize him as the odd one out. Casey noted how this plays out in small but revealing scenes, such as when everyone on the bus is singing carefree songs like She'll Be Comin' Round the Mountain, and then when it's Neal's turn to choose, he starts singing 3 Coins in the Fountain. The other passengers stare at him in confusion, until Del jumps in to save the moment by leading everyone in a rousing version of Meet the Flintstones. Both Alan and Casey mentioned the film's underlying message about what family really means, and how to an extent it explores the idea of a chosen family. At one point or another, we all have friends who become part of our family, even if they're not blood-related. They also brought up the film's theme of cherishing what matters most. Casey pointed out that when Del says, "I like me," after a heated argument with Neal, it offers a glimpse into his self-awareness and perhaps a reflection into his past relationships. Casey also mentioned that he admires happy-go-lucky people like Del, those who seem to let life roll off their backs, even when things go wrong. Alan brought up how the film's over-the-top chaos reminded him of the old Looney Tunes shorts. He mentioned one sequence in particular. When Del accidentally drives on the wrong side of the highway and 2 semi-trucks come barreling towards them, they somehow manage to squeeze between them, losing pieces of the car in the process. And of course, a fire that causes the car to become a burnt-out hollow shell is still able to drive down the highway. I also wondered whether the film would resonate with today's audiences. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is the product of the 1980s, an era before cell phones, tablets, or constant connectivity. Today, it is much easier to ignore people by putting in earbuds, scrolling through your phone, or playing a game on your tablet. Still, the frustrations of travel haven't changed. Canceled flights, mechanical breakdowns, human error, and miscommunications are just as common. While today technology makes it easier to rebook a hotel room or find a car service with a single click, it also means competing with everyone else trying to do the same thing. Forget calling customer service. You'll likely be on hold for hours, waiting for someone who may or may not be able to help you. Traveling during the holidays remains one of the most stressful experiences imaginable. With so many people on the move, and all demanding to be helped at the same time, the film still resonates because it captures the shared frustration in a way that's both chaotic and funny, reminding us that sometimes the only thing you can do is laugh at the madness. Let's take a coffee break. Before we dive deeper into the themes of this film, I want to take a quick coffee break, because a movie about constant motion feels like it's the perfect time to talk about coffee to go. We're so used to grabbing coffee on the run these days that we forget how recent this idea actually is. According to several pieces I read, the to-go cup really took off around the 1960s and 70s as commuter culture grew and productivity became a kind of national badge of honor. Coffee stopped being a sit-down ritual and became something you could clutch on the subway, the bus, or a long walk to the office. There is something very Neal Page about that, isn't there? That anxious, forward-moving energy of, I need to get there, I need to get this done, I don't have time to stop. You can practically picture Neal's coffee spilling as he sprints across the terminal. But the articles also pointed out how this shift changed our relationship with coffee. A piece from the Oxford Blue talked about how coffee culture used to be about lingering, about conversation, community, and slowing down, and how the to-go lifestyle slowly eclipsed that. One of the studies I looked at from the London School of Economics even showed that when people rely exclusively on disposables, it erodes not just environmental sustainability, but the social ritual of coffee itself. And I get it. There are days when coffee to go has saved me, when the paper cup or travel mug is the only thing standing between me and total emotional collapse. Especially living in LA, where you're always caught between point A, point B, and 10 other obligations shouting for your attention. But I also think about the moments where coffee was more than just caffeine. It was connection, it was conversation, it was sitting with my grandmother or my parents or a friend and letting the world slow down, even briefly. The travel chaos in planes, trains, and automobiles mirrors the way we use coffee now, something we grip tightly while running through the worst parts of our day. And yet, ironically, it's Del, the guy who seems totally unbothered by speed and schedules, who reminds us what we lose when everything becomes go, go, go. In fact, one article I read made a point that America has become so accustomed to coffee on the run that we've forgotten the comfort of sit-and-stay experiences. And while I don't think coffee to go is bad, I often think it's necessary, it does make me wonder how many moments we rush past because we're trying to drink life while moving, much like Neal clutching his travel mug as he barrels towards the next disaster. Let's slow things down a bit and shift into one of the more meaningful themes of the film: chosen family. In the film, there's a sense of what we call a chosen family. Del is in the position where he is consistently on the go, away from his family, except the photo of his wife that he carries with him. When Neal and Del are on their adventure, we see in almost every location that Del knows someone whom he's helped along the way. There's a son of a friend who helps drive them to the next destination, a motel owner who obliges by getting Neal a room, and others along the way. Both Neal and Del are on the road in their professions, with Neal traveling often for work and being away from his family, and Del hops from one city to another selling his shower curtain rings. It can be a rather lonely life, and what makes the bond between Neal and Del so strong is the fact that they become somewhat of a chosen family, albeit in chaotic circumstances. Del helps Neal along the way the only way he knows how, and Neal provides a bit of family life for the lonely Del. While many of us have our biological families, many do not have that luxury. Some have lost their families, others have been rejected due to their identity, and others may have been orphaned and never knew their family. It then becomes vital to find someone, or a group, who can offer that support, love, and care that a normally defined family provides. I'm lucky to have both a chosen family and a close biological one. When I went to college, I was far away from home, and it became vital to find friends who would be there for me when the times got rough. Those of us who are in the theater program in college understand this, as the theater department was its own type of family. A chosen family can help in times of distress, when the world becomes a dark and lonely place. According to the Sage Encyclopedia of Marriage, Family, and Couples Counseling, chosen families are non-biological kinship bonds, whether legally recognized or not, deliberately chosen for a purpose of mutual support and love. A chosen family offers you a chance to experience joy, love, and a sense of belonging. To have someone there to keep you from feeling intensely isolated and alone during major hardships in life. When I was laid off from a job and my life spiraled out of control, I had my family and my chosen family to help me with love and support so I could get back on my feet. I am always appreciative and grateful that I had had that in my life, and I try to pay it forward. And this goes back to our story with Neal and Del. There is a moment where Del feels comfortable enough to tell Neal his feelings, that he loves himself, and that he's there for anyone who may need a friend. Underneath, he does have a strong sense of loneliness, and this can come off a bit awkward when he starts talking to strangers. Neal isn't used to this, but as the story unfolds, he comes to understand what Del is talking about, and all the pieces fall into place. Neal pays it forward by inviting Del into his home and family during one of the most traditional family holidays. Before I move on to my final thoughts of the film, I want to take a moment to talk about John Candy, because it's impossible to watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles without feeling the emotional weight of just how special he was. Candy had a remarkable ability to play characters who were funny on the surface, but quietly heartbreaking underneath. Critics at this time noted that this role, Del Griffith, was one of his finest performances, because it let him do what he did best: make you laugh, and then make you feel something deeper when you least expect it. Roger Ebert even said that Candy found his deepest notes of his career in this film. One of Candy's most famous real-life quotes was, "I think I have become an actor to hide from myself. Something is haunting and human about that." Especially when you think about Del, a man who cracks jokes, fills silence with chatter, and tries desperately to be liked, but whose sadness sits just beneath the surface. Another quote of his that really resonated with me was, "My characters aren't losers. They're good people who something unfortunate has happened to." And that is Del Griffith to the core. A good man, a lonely man, a man trying his best. Candy was loved not just for his comedy, but for his warmth. People who worked with him, from Catherine O'Hara to Steve Martin to Harold Ramis, often mentioned that his kindness off-screen matched the tenderness we see in his most heartfelt roles. He wasn't afraid to let vulnerability seep into his performances, which is rare in comedies, and even rarer in big Hollywood productions of the 1980s. In reading biographical notes and interviews, There's a recurring theme. John Candy had a huge heart, and his heart showed up in every character he played. Even in his broadest comedies, there was always a flicker of humanity. The sense that this was a person trying, failing, and carrying more weight than he let on. That's why Del feels so real, and why the ending of this movie hits harder than it did before. Candy once said in an interview near the end of his life, "If I have made people laugh, then I've done my job. But if I've made them feel something, that's what matters most to me." And in this film, he did both effortlessly. Steve Martin years later called Candy a gentle soul, and said that filming the final scene, when Neal realizes Del is alone and vulnerable, was one of the most emotional acting moments of his career, because Candy wasn't just playing that loneliness. There was real depth behind his eyes. John Candy passed away in 1994 at only 40 years old. And even now, decades later, audiences still talk about him with affection reserved only for a handful of performers. His work endures because it was never just about humor. It was about humanity. He made people feel welcome, seen and understood. And this film about the chaos of travel and the stress of holidays and the unpredictability of life, John Candy reminds us that sometimes the people who make us laugh the hardest are also the ones carrying the heaviest burdens. Del Griffith is unforgettable because John Candy was unforgettable. And as we shift into the final reflection, it's worth remembering the last quiet truth that this film leaves us with. Sometimes family isn't just the people you travel home to. Sometimes it's the people you meet along the way, who help you see the world a little differently, and who remind us that kindness still matters. As we look ahead at the upcoming holiday season, where love and joy fill the air and we help those in need, let us remember Neal and Del and their unlikely friendship that was made during the moments of stress and chaos. Our plans may go awry, flights get canceled, but what remains is our ability to bring some joy into our lives and others. We could all use a few more Dels in this world when times get tough, to have an adventure, meet new people, and see life through other perspectives. Thanksgiving is a time of reflection and gratitude. So let's use this time on Earth wisely. Take a page from Del's book and say to yourself, "I like me." Thank you for taking this trip with me. Be sure your belongings are secured before we land, and thank you for traveling with Real Beans. And remember, sip, watch, repeat. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Real Beans. If you enjoyed our conversation today, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, subscribe, and leave us a review. It really helps us grow and reach more fellow film and coffee lovers. You can catch all of our episodes on your favorite podcast platform, on our YouTube channel, and for even more insights, recommendations, and everything films, head over to realbeans.com. Want to support our show and help us keep brewing up great content? Visit realbeans.com/support.